8 months after signing the divorce papers, Marcus Blackwood's world shattered in a single heartbeat, not from the sight of his ex-wife Elena at the charity gala, but from the unmistakable curve of her belly carrying the child he thought would never exist. But that revelation was still hours away. At 6:47 a.m., Marcus stood in his Toronto penthouse, 43 floors above the bustling streets, watching Lake Ontario glisten under the early October sun. The floor-to-ceiling windows reflected a man who had everything money could buy and nothing his heart truly wanted. His reflection showed sharp cheekbones, steel-grey eyes that once sparkled when Elena laughed, and a mouth that had forgotten how to smile without calculating profit margins. The coffee in his hand, imported from Colombia, prepared by his housekeeper Mrs. Patterson, tasted like ash. Everything did these days. Even success had lost its flavor. His latest acquisition, a renewable energy company in British Columbia, should have thrilled him. Instead, he felt nothing but the familiar hollowness that had consumed him since Elena walked out of their Rosedale mansion, her wedding ring gleaming on the granite kitchen counter like an accusation. What do you think drives successful people to sacrifice love for ambition? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The elevator chimed softly as Marcus descended to the parking garage, his Italian leather shoes echoing against polished concrete. His driver, James, waited beside the midnight black Bentley, but Marcus waved him off. He needed to drive, needed the illusion of control that came from gripping the steering wheel and choosing his own direction, something he'd forgotten how to do in his marriage. As the Bentley glided through Toronto's morning traffic, Marcus's phone buzzed with the usual symphony of notifications. Stock prices, meeting reminders, board member complaints. But none of it registered. His mind was trapped in a loop, replaying the same memory that had haunted him for 8 months. "I'm pregnant, Marcus." Elena's voice had been soft that February evening, barely audible over the crackling fireplace in their study. She'd stood in the doorway, her dark hair catching the amber light, wearing the cream sweater he'd bought her in Paris, back when he still noticed such things. His response had been automatic, clinical. "Schedule the appointment for next week. Dr. Richardson is discreet." The way her face had crumbled, God, how could he have been so blind? How could he have assumed she'd simply dispose of their child like an inconvenient merger? "I never said I wanted," she'd begun, but he'd already turned back to his laptop, already dismissed her to take a call from Hong Kong. 3 days later, she was gone. No fights, no screaming matches, just an empty house and a note that read, "Some things are more important than being a Blackwood. Our baby is one of them." Marcus had convinced himself she'd gone through with the procedure anyway. Elena was practical, wasn't she? She understood that their lifestyle, his career, the constant travel and 18-hour workdays weren't compatible with diapers and lullabies. She'd realize he was right. Eventually. She always did. Except she hadn't come back. The Bentley pulled into the underground parking of Blackwood Industries headquarters on Bay Street. 52 floors of glass and steel, a monument to his father's legacy and his own ruthless ambition. As Marcus stepped into his private elevator, he caught his reflection in the brushed steel doors. When had he become so much like his father? Harold Blackwood had built an empire but died alone, estranged from everyone who'd ever mattered. "Good morning, Mr. Blackwood." His assistant, Patricia, greeted him with the day's schedule as he entered his corner office. "Your 9 a.m. with the Vancouver development team is ready in conference room A. The charity gala committee called to confirm your attendance tonight, the Children's Heart Foundation dinner at the Fairmont Royal York." Marcus nodded absently, settling behind his mahogany desk. The charity gala. Elena had always organized his charitable commitments, had made him care about causes beyond profit margins. Now his publicist handled such things, picking events that enhanced his image rather than his soul. "Sir." Patricia's voice held a note of concern. "Should I confirm your attendance?" "Yes," Marcus replied, though part of him wanted to cancel. These events had become exercises in emptiness, rooms full of Toronto's elite discussing tax write-offs while poverty persisted just blocks away. Elena would have hated how cynical he'd become. But Elena wasn't there to hate anything about him anymore. The Fairmont Royal York's grand ballroom sparkled with the kind of orchestrated elegance that money could choreograph but never make genuine. Crystal chandeliers cast dancing shadows across tables draped in ivory silk, while Toronto's philanthropic elite mingled beneath towering floral arrangements that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Marcus adjusted his black tie cufflinks, platinum, a wedding gift from Elena, and surveyed the room with practiced detachment. He'd perfected this performance over 8 months, Smile, shake hands, write checks, avoid meaningful conversations. Tonight felt no different as he navigated between pharmaceutical heiresses and tech moguls, each interaction a carefully measured exchange of pleasantries and business cards. Marcus. There you are. Catherine Morrison, the Foundation's president, appeared at his elbow with the determination of a woman accustomed to commanding seven-figure donations. I have someone I'm dying for you to meet. She's flown in from Vancouver specifically for tonight's auction. Apparently she's bidding on the pediatric wing naming rights. Marcus nodded politely, his attention already drifting to the bar where he could escape this conversation with socially acceptable whiskey. But as Catherine steered him across the room, chattering about donation targets and tax benefits, something made him look up. Time fractured. There, beside the auction display table, stood Elena. But not the Elena he remembered. This woman carried herself with a quiet confidence that seemed to emanate from within, her dark hair swept into an elegant chignon that emphasized the graceful curve of her neck. She wore a flowing midnight blue gown that skimmed her figure like water, and as she turned to examine an auction item, a week in a Muskoka cottage, Marcus saw what stopped his heart cold. The unmistakable swell of her belly. 6 months, maybe 7, judging by the way the silk draped across her form. Their child. Their child. Elena Vasquez, Catherine was saying, her voice seeming to come from underwater. She's made quite the impact in Vancouver's non-profit sector. Runs a shelter for pregnant women and new mothers. Tonight she's representing the Pacific Coast Children's Alliance. Elena Vasquez. She'd taken back her maiden name. Marcus felt the floor tilt beneath his feet. His chest constricted as if someone had wrapped steel bands around his ribs and tightened them with each breath. The sounds of the gala, clinking glasses, orchestral music, refined laughter, merged into white noise. She'd kept their baby. For 8 months. What assumptions have you made that turned out to be completely wrong? Tell us in the comments. We'd love to hear your stories. Mr. Blackwood. Catherine's voice penetrated his shock. Are you feeling all right? You look quite pale. But Marcus couldn't respond. Because at that moment, Elena looked up from the auction catalogue, her warm brown eyes scanning the crowd with the casual interest of someone enjoying a pleasant evening, until her gaze found his. The catalogue slipped from her fingers, fluttering to the marble floor like a wounded bird. For a heartbeat that stretched into eternity, they simply stared at each other across 20 feet of Toronto's glittering elite. Her hand moved instinctively to her belly, protective, defensive, and Marcus saw something flicker across her features. Surprise. Yes. But underneath it, something harder. Resolve. She'd known he might be here. Of course she had. His attendance at these events was reported in the society pages. She'd come anyway, heavy with their child, beautiful and strong and everything he'd thrown away in his blind pursuit of control. Excuse me, Marcus managed, his voice rough as gravel. He moved toward her without conscious thought, his feet carrying him through the crowd as conversations parted around him like water around a ship's bow. Elena straightened as he approached, one hand still curved protectively over their unborn child. Up close, he could see the subtle changes 8 months had wrought, a new depth in her eyes, a strength in the set of her shoulders that spoke of battles fought and won without him. Marcus. Her voice was steady, polite. The voice she might use with a stranger. Elena. Her name felt foreign on his tongue, like a language he'd forgotten how to speak. His eyes dropped involuntarily to her belly, to the miracle he'd callously dismissed. You're pregnant. Yes. She lifted her chin, and he caught a glimpse of the fire that had first drawn him to her 12 years ago at University of Toronto, when she was a journalism student who challenged his economics professor and made Marcus question everything he thought he knew about worth and value. But I thought, he stopped, the words tangling in his throat. I thought you'd gotten rid of it. I thought you'd chosen me over our child. I thought you'd come back. You thought what, Marcus? Her voice carried a note of steel now, quiet but unmistakable. That I'd do what you wanted? That I'd eliminate our baby like a line item in your budget? The accusation hit him like a physical blow. Around them, the gala continued its elegant dance, but Marcus felt as if they were enclosed in a bubble of reckoning, 8 months of assumptions and abandonment crystallizing into this single, devastating moment. Elena, please. Could we talk? Privately. She studied his face for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, almost imperceptibly, she nodded toward the hotel's garden terrace. The Royal York's rooftop terrace offered a sanctuary from the gala's orchestrated perfection. October's crisp air carried the scent of dying leaves and distant lake water, while Toronto's skyline glittered beyond the wrought iron railings like scattered diamonds. Elena pulled her silk shawl closer around her shoulders, the movement accentuating the curve of her belly in a way that made Marcus's chest ache with longing and regret. They stood apart, separated by more than the 6 feet of flagstone between them. 8 months of silence stretched like a chasm, filled with everything they'd failed to say when words might have mattered. When? Marcus's voice cracked on the single word. He cleared his throat and tried again. When is the baby due? December 15th. Elena's response was matter-of-fact, but he caught the way her hand curved protectively over their child. Dr. Chen says everything's progressing normally. Dr. Chen. Not Dr. Richardson, their old physician who would have performed the procedure Marcus had so callously suggested. Elena had found new doctors, built a new life, created a world that didn't include him. Chen's good, he said, then immediately felt foolish. What did he know about Elena's new life? What right did he have to approve her choices? She is. Elena's voice softened slightly. She specializes in high-risk pregnancies. Has an excellent NICU partnership at BC Children's Hospital. High risk. The words hit Marcus like ice water. High risk. Is everything, are you? I'm fine, Marcus. We're both fine. But something in her tone suggested it hadn't always been certain. It's just precautionary. Given my age, the stress of the first trimester. The stress of their divorce. The stress of him abandoning her when she needed him most. Marcus gripped the terrace railing, the cold iron biting into his palms. Why didn't you tell me? The question escaped before he could stop it. Elena, if there were complications, if you needed. What? She turned to face him fully, and in the soft glow of the terrace lights, he could see the exhaustion she'd hidden so well inside. If I needed what, Marcus? Money. I have my own career now. Support. I found that too. Love. Her voice caught almost imperceptibly. Our child and I don't need anything from you. Our child. She'd said it so naturally, claimed their baby with a fierce protectiveness that made Marcus realize how completely he'd forfeited his right to that possessive pronoun. I would have helped, he said quietly, if I'd known about the complications. You did know. Elena's words cut through the October air with surgical precision. You knew I was pregnant, and your first instinct was to eliminate the problem. You knew I was struggling with morning sickness so severe I couldn't keep water down, and you complained when I missed the Morrison Industries dinner. You knew, Marcus. You just didn't care enough to see. Each accusation landed like a physical blow, and Marcus found himself struggling to breathe. She was right. God help him, she was absolutely right. He'd been so consumed with maintaining his schedule, his image, his perfect life that he'd missed the signs of her suffering. The night I told you about the baby, Elena continued, her voice growing stronger with each word, do you remember what you said after suggesting the abortion? Marcus closed his eyes, but the memory came anyway, sharp and unforgiving. I said we could try again in a few years. When things were more convenient. When things were more convenient. She repeated his words like a diagnosis. As if our child was a merger that could be rescheduled. As if love operated on a quarterly timeline. Elena, I waited, you know. Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper, but it carried more weight than any shout. For 3 days after I told you, I waited for you to come to me. To ask how I was feeling, to talk about baby names, to show any sign that you wanted this child we'd created together. Marcus felt something break inside his chest. I was scared. The admission surprised them both. Elena's eyes widened slightly, and Marcus realized he'd never spoken those words aloud, had barely acknowledged the fear to himself. Scared of what? She asked. Of failing. Of becoming my father. The words tumbled out in a rush. Harold Blackwood built an empire and destroyed everyone who loved him. He missed my childhood for board meetings, my mother's funeral for a merger in Hong Kong. I swore I'd never inflict that on a child, and then suddenly there you were, carrying our baby, and all I could think was that I'd ruin everything I touched. Have you ever let fear make a decision that cost you everything? Share your experience in the comments. Sometimes our biggest regrets come from the chances we were too scared to take. Welcome back, my incredible viewers. Your comments from the last video have been absolutely overwhelming. I can see how deeply you're all connecting with the story, and the theories you've been sharing are absolutely brilliant. Some of you are surprisingly close to the truth of what's coming next. But before we continue, don't forget to smash that like button if you're enjoying what you're seeing. Your support means the world to me and helps this channel grow. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss any of our uploads. We're building an amazing community here, and I don't want you to miss out on what's coming. And please, share this video with your friends, family, or anyone who would love this type of content. The more people we can bring into this community, the better it gets for everyone. Your engagement in the comments has been incredible, and I love reading every single one of your thoughts and theories. Keep them coming. Now, let's go in depth into the story. Elena was quiet for a long moment, studying his face in the soft light. When she spoke, her voice held a note of something that might have been compassion. So you decided to ruin it first? To control the inevitable? I thought. Marcus struggled to find words for the twisted logic that had seemed so reasonable 8 months ago. I thought if we waited, if we planned it properly, I could be better. I could figure out how to balance everything. And what about what I wanted? What I dreamed about? Elena's hand pressed against her belly, and Marcus caught a glimpse of movement beneath the silk, their child, restless and alive. Did it ever occur to you that I might have been willing to help you figure it out? That we could have learned together? The question hung between them like a bridge Marcus had burned before he'd ever thought to cross it. Below them, Toronto's traffic hummed its endless urban symphony, life continuing its relentless forward motion while they stood suspended in the wreckage of their marriage. I know I don't deserve it, Marcus said finally, but could you tell me about her? Him? The baby? Elena's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Her. We're having a daughter. A daughter. Marcus felt his knees go weak. A daughter. Sofia Elena Vasquez. The name rolled off Elena's tongue like a prayer. Sophie, for short. She's active at night. Loves it when I read aloud. She responds to music, especially that Sarah McLachlan song you used to play when you couldn't sleep. Angel, Marcus whispered. He remembered those nights, Elena curled against his chest while the melody filled their bedroom, both of them younger and foolish enough to believe love could conquer anything. She's going to be stubborn like her mother, I think. And probably too smart for her own good. Elena's voice carried a note of fond exasperation. She kicks every time I try to work late, as if she's already trying to teach me about work-life balance. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. Elena, Marcus began, but she held up a hand. I should get back inside. The auction starts soon, and I promised to bid on the therapy program funding. She moved toward the terrace doors, but Marcus couldn't let her walk away again. Not yet. Wait. Please. His voice cracked with desperation. Would it be possible for me to be part of this? Part of her life? Elena paused, her hand on the door handle. When she turned back, her eyes held a complexity of emotions Marcus couldn't begin to parse. I don't know, Marcus. I honestly don't know. The auction's excitement filtered through the terrace doors, laughter, applause, the auctioneer's practice cadence. But Marcus felt as if he and Elena existed in a separate universe where only truth could survive. I don't know isn't no, he said quietly, hope threading through his voice like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Elena's laugh held no humor. Marcus, you can't just show up and expect. I know. He stepped closer, close enough to catch the familiar scent of her perfume, jasmine and vanilla, the same fragrance she'd worn on their first date at the CN Tower restaurant. I know I have no right to expect anything. But Elena, please, just let me try to explain. Explain what? How you threw away our marriage the moment it became inconvenient. How you assumed I'd just dispose of our child like unwanted furniture. Her voice rose slightly, emotion finally cracking through her composed facade. I was wrong. The words came out raw, stripped of every corporate polish and calculated charm he perfected over the years. I was so completely, devastatingly wrong that I don't even recognize the man who said those things to you. People don't just change, Marcus. Not fundamentally. Not in 8 months. You did. He gestured toward her belly, toward the woman she'd become, stronger, more radiant, more herself than he'd ever allowed her to be in their marriage. Look at you. You built a shelter for women and children. You're bidding on charity programs. You're about to become a mother. You transformed yourself completely. I didn't transform myself, Elena said, her voice sharp with pain. I became who I always was underneath, the woman you never bothered to see. The accusation hit him like a physical blow, but Marcus forced himself to face it, to really hear what she was saying. You're right. I was so busy trying to mold you into what I thought a Blackwood wife should be that I never asked what Elena Vasquez wanted to become. And what makes you think you see me now? Marcus was quiet for a moment, studying her face in the amber light spilling from the ballroom. When he spoke, his voice carried a certainty that surprised them both. Because for the first time in my life, I'm not looking through the lens of what I want or need. I'm just seeing you. And you're magnificent, Elena. You always were. I was just too blind and too selfish to realize it. Something flickered in her eyes, surprise, perhaps, or the faintest ember of hope. But her voice remained guarded. Pretty words, Marcus. But words are just words. Then let me show you. He pulled out his phone, fingers flying across the screen with urgent precision. Patricia, it's Marcus. I need you to cancel everything tomorrow. Everything. Reschedule the Vancouver meeting, push the board presentation to next week, and draft a memo to the senior partners. He paused, looking directly at Elena. I'm taking indefinite personal leave effective immediately. Elena's eyes widened. Marcus, what are you? No, wait, he continued into the phone. Better yet, schedule an emergency board meeting for Monday morning. I'm stepping down as CEO. Marcus, stop. Elena reached for his phone, but he'd already ended the call. Have you lost your mind? Blackwood Industries is your life. No, he said quietly, pocketing the device. It was my excuse for not living. There's a difference. What would you sacrifice for a second chance at love? Sometimes the biggest risks lead to the most beautiful rewards. Share your thoughts below. Elena stared at him as if he'd sprouted wings. You can't throw away everything you've built for. For what? For my daughter? For the woman I love more than my next breath? Elena, the company will survive without me. Hell, it'll probably thrive. My obsession with control has been stifling innovation for years. But our family. His voice cracked. Our family won't survive if I don't change. Really change. Not just promise to do better, but actually become the man you and Sophie deserve. Tears glistened in Elena's eyes, but her voice remained steady. And what if I say no? What if I tell you it's too late, that the damage is too deep to repair? Will you blame me for destroying your career? No. The answer came without hesitation. Because even if you never forgive me, even if I never get the chance to be Sophie's father, I still need to become the man who deserves that chance. I've spent 8 months in hell, Elena, realizing that every dollar I earned, every deal I closed, every success I celebrated meant absolutely nothing without you there to share it. Elena's composure finally cracked, a tear spilling down her cheek. You really hurt me, Marcus. When I needed you most, you weren't there. You made me feel like our baby was a mistake, like loving you was a mistake. I know. He wanted to reach for her, to wipe away her tears, but he forced himself to stay still. I know, and I'll spend the rest of my life making up for it if you'll let me. But Elena, our love was never a mistake. Our baby isn't a mistake. I was the mistake, thinking I could control love like a business transaction, thinking I could schedule family around quarterly reports. Through the terrace doors, they could hear the auctioneer announcing the final item. The pediatric therapy program funding Elena had come to bid on. You should go, Marcus said softly. That program needs your support. Elena wiped her cheek with the back of her hand. What about you? I'll be here. For as long as you need me to prove that this time, I'm not going anywhere. She studied his face for a long moment, searching for something, sincerity, perhaps, or the man she'd fallen in love with all those years ago at university. Finally, she nodded. Okay, she said quietly. But Marcus, proving you've changed isn't a sprint. It's a marathon. Are you sure you're ready for that? I've been training for it my whole life, he replied. I just didn't know it until now. 3 months later, the first snow of December dusted Vancouver's streets like powdered sugar, transforming the city into a winter wonderland that seemed to glow with possibility. Marcus stood outside the Pacific Coast Women's Shelter, a thermos of Elena's favorite peppermint tea in one hand and a small wrapped gift in the other, watching through the window as his wife again, as of 2 weeks ago in a quiet ceremony at Queen Elizabeth Park, read to a circle of pregnant women and new mothers. She was radiant in the way only women carrying life could be, her dark hair catching the afternoon light as she animated the story with gentle gestures. At 8.5 months pregnant, Sophie had turned Elena into a graceful ship navigating the world with serene purpose, and Marcus found himself falling in love with her all over again every single day. The past 3 months had been a revelation. True to his word, Marcus had stepped down as CEO of Blackwood Industries, transitioning to chairman emeritus while his protégé, Sarah Chen, took the helm. The company hadn't just survived his departure, it had flourished under leadership that valued innovation over control, collaboration over domination. But the real transformation had been in Marcus himself. He'd spent October learning Elena's daily routines, not to manage them but to support them. He'd accompanied her to every doctor's appointment, his hand warm in hers as they listened to Sophie's strong heartbeat on the ultrasound monitor. He'd helped paint the nursery in Elena's cozy Kitsilano apartment, soft lavender walls with hand-painted butterflies, each one representing a dream they were building together. Most importantly, he'd learned to listen. Really listen. To Elena's fears about motherhood, her excitement about the shelter's expansion plans, her middle-of-the-night cravings for ice cream and conversation. He discovered that love wasn't about grand gestures and expensive gifts, though the custom rocking chair he'd had crafted by a local artisan had made Elena cry happy tears, but about presence. About showing up, consistently and completely, for all the ordinary moments that composed a life together. Have you ever had someone truly change for you? Sometimes the most beautiful love stories are about second chances and the courage to become better. Tell us about your experience in the comments. The shelter's door chimed as Marcus entered, and several of the women looked up with warm recognition. Over the past months, he'd become a familiar figure here, not as the intimidating billionaire he'd once been, but as Elena's husband who brought coffee on cold mornings and helped assemble cribs donated by local furniture stores. Mr. M, called Jasmine, a 19-year-old who'd arrived at the shelter 6 months pregnant and scared. Now she held her baby boy, David, with the confident love of a mother who'd found her strength. Elena's been timing contractions for the past hour, but she won't admit she's in labor. Marcus felt his heart skip a beat. She's what? I am not in labor, Elena called from the reading circle, though Marcus noticed she was breathing with the controlled rhythm they'd practiced in birthing class. These are just persistent Braxton Hicks contractions. That happened to come every 8 minutes, laughed Maria, a nurse who volunteered at the shelter. Honey, I've delivered 4 babies. Trust me, Sophie's ready to meet her parents. Elena looked up as Marcus approached, and he saw the mixture of excitement and nervousness in her brown eyes. Marcus, I think, oh. She gripped the arms of her chair as another contraction hit, stronger than the others. That's it, Marcus said, his voice calm despite his racing heart. He'd been preparing for this moment for months, reading every book Elena had recommended, attending every class, but now that Sophie was actually ready to make her debut, he felt the familiar flutter of fear, not the paralyzing terror of his past, but the healthy, loving fear of a man who had everything to gain and everything to lose. Ladies, Elena said to her reading circle, her voice tight but steady, I think we're going to have to finish Charlotte's Web next week. The next few hours passed in a blur of controlled chaos. The drive to BC Women's Hospital through Vancouver's snowy streets, Elena's hand gripping his as contractions intensified. The admission process, where Marcus fumbled with insurance forms while Elena breathed through each wave of pain with the grace of a woman who'd prepared for this moment her entire life. Dr. Chen met them in the delivery room, her calm professionalism immediately putting them at ease. How are we feeling, Mom and Dad? Mom and Dad. The words hit Marcus like a benediction. After 8 months of believing he'd forfeited the right to that title, hearing it applied to him felt like coming home. Terrified, Elena admitted between contractions, then looked at Marcus with a smile that took his breath away. But ready. So ready, Marcus agreed, lifting her hand to kiss her knuckles. We've got this, love. Labor progressed quickly, too quickly for the epidural Elena had planned on, but she faced each contraction with the same quiet strength she'd shown through their separation, their reconciliation, and their journey back to each other. I can see her head. Dr. Chen announced. 2 more pushes, Elena. 2 more pushes and you'll meet your daughter. Marcus felt tears streaming down his face as Sophie Elena Blackwood entered the world at 11:47 p.m. on December 13, 2 days early and already announcing her presence with indignant cries that filled the delivery room with the most beautiful sound he'd ever heard. "She's perfect," Elena whispered as Dr. Chen placed their daughter on her chest, skin to skin, their baby girl still slippery and red and absolutely miraculous. "She's perfect," Marcus echoed, his voice breaking with wonder. Sophie had Elena's dark hair and, when she briefly opened her eyes, the promise of Marcus's steel-grey gaze. But more than that, she had something neither of her parents had possessed when they first met 12 years ago. She had the security of being wanted, completely and unconditionally, from her very first breath. "Hello, Sophie," Marcus whispered, gently touching one tiny, perfect finger. "I'm your daddy, and I've been waiting my whole life to meet you." Sophie seemed to settle at the sound of his voice, her cries softening into newborn whimpers as she nuzzled against Elena's chest. "She knows you," Elena said softly, exhausted but radiant. "She knows your voice from all those nights you talked to her." It was true. For the past 3 months, Marcus had made it a ritual to speak to Sophie every night, his hand on Elena's belly as he told their unborn daughter about his day, about his dreams for her future, about how much he loved her mother and how grateful he was for the chance to be her father. As dawn broke over Vancouver, painting the hospital room in shades of gold and promise, Marcus held his daughter for the first time while Elena slept. Sophie fit perfectly in his arms, as if she'd been designed specifically for this moment, for his hands, for his heart. "I promise you, little one," he whispered, his voice steady with conviction, "that I will never be too busy, too important, or too scared to be exactly where you need me to be. You and your mama are my greatest adventure, my most important acquisition, my finest achievement." Sophie yawned, a tiny sound that made Marcus laugh through his tears. "And I promise," he continued, "that I'll teach you the difference between success and significance, between having everything and having what matters. Because you, Sophie Elena Blackwood, and your beautiful mother, you are everything that matters." Elena stirred, her eyes fluttering open to find Marcus still holding their daughter, both of them bathed in morning light. "Good morning, my love," she said softly. "Good morning," Marcus replied, then looked down at Sophie, who seemed to be studying his face with newborn intensity. "And good morning to you too, princess. Welcome to your beautiful life. What's the most important lesson you want to pass on to the next generation? Family isn't just about blood, it's about showing up with love every single day. Share your thoughts about what makes a family strong in the comments below." Outside the hospital window, Vancouver was waking up to a world transformed by snow and possibility. And inside room 314, the Blackwood family was just beginning their greatest adventure. One built not on corporate mergers or quarterly profits, but on the simple, revolutionary act of loving each other completely, imperfectly, and forever. Some stories end with dramatic declarations and grand gestures. But the best ones, the ones that matter, end with quiet moments of profound love, with ordinary people choosing each other again and again, with a recognition that sometimes the most extraordinary thing you can do is simply show up for the people who matter most. Marcus had spent 43 years learning to succeed. But at 11:47 p.m. on December 13th, holding his daughter while his wife slept peacefully beside them, he finally learned what it meant to live. And it was beautiful. Thanks for watching till the end. We know you loved this story, and there are many more thrilling ones waiting for you. Just click on the video on your screen to dive into the next chapter.